Nikki Olson. I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor. I started getting trained in MBB about 4 years ago when I went to a domestic violence training and learned about it from there. And I was certified shortly thereafter, and I've been using it pretty much solely in my practice since that time, so for about 4 years since then. I really like the fact that our clients, we don't have to fix them. They're not broken, they're not damaged, and that we can kind of come up with this common language that we can kind of understand to work through some of their things that are holding them back from functioning the way that they want to function. I'd say the people that are wanting to learn MBB or know nothing about MBB is that you don't have to have anything wrong with you to be using mind-body bridging. I always tell people that these are practices and skills that anybody can use and benefit from on a daily basis, and they're just good life skills to have, to know how to function through kind of the day-to-day turmoil that we all have. I'd say this modality for other counselors is something that pulls from a lot of different aspects of other modalities and really streamlines to getting to talking about what we really need to talk about in a session. It doesn't involve a lot of work on the therapist part. You really put the work back on your clients and helps them to really be in charge of their own session. And you're just there as a guide or someone that's just walking them through how to use these skills. So it's really something that's kind of eased a burden in my therapy practice, and I think it would help a lot of other therapists.
speak a little bit louder so you don't have to talk as loud.
Oh, okay.
Do you also
Thanks.
say record?
Yes, I did.
Cool. So, cool.
Okay, I'm not hearing that doing anything, though.
It's on.
Is it working? Oh, okay. I just can't hear it from up here. Thank you. Okay, so each of us, no?
No, apparently not. Yeah.
I didn't think so, but
Sometimes you can't hear it up here.
but I thought, I could be making it up. How's that?
That's better.
There we go. Good, then I won't have to shout so much. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So we can access this innate healing, goodness, power, and wisdom if and when we learn to rest this thing that we call the identity system. So when the identity system part of our brain is active, we tend to experience that as sort of a clouded mind, sometimes an anxious feeling, kind of this fogginess, confusion, that sort of thing is what we experience. And we'll also experience it when in our body. So when we feel body tension, tightness, that sort of thing, these are usually signals to us that our, what we call our I system, is active and is getting in the way. So the I system impairs access to what we refer to in mind-body bridging as natural functioning. So we have the ability to be in two states of functioning. For simplicity's sake today, we can either be in I system functioning or we can be in natural functioning. Natural functioning is our birthright as humans. You might think about natural functioning. I'd like to think about it as kids playing. Kids playing without any kind of top-down influences on how they're playing or what they're playing. It's just very natural functioning. You may remember those moments from your childhood, and as we get older, we tend to have less and less of them. I think our I system becomes more and more dominant. So the I system sort of restricts natural functioning, puts it in a vice, limits our capacity. When we are in natural functioning, went the wrong way, I guess. So I'll say a little more about natural functioning in a second, but I define the I system as a metasystem, which can be thought of as a system that underlies or cuts across multiple systems. So the I system is a mind-body system, and I'm going to explain a little bit of the neuroscience behind that. But I think of the I system as this meta-system that's operating within us. So what the I system does is it manufactures requirements of each moment in order to create an identity. So the identity system is not in and of itself a bad thing. Actually, it turns out that we need its presence in order to create a separate, distinct identity as an individual. See us as something different from some larger whole. So the identity system is a really important part of that process. We can never get rid of it. It can't be eliminated. But what we can learn to do is to learn to not let it dominate. That's what we're after, is to not let the identity system be the dominant system. We want it to be taking its rightful place along other systems in our brain. So when a requirement is unmet, identity system requirements are shoulds. This is how I should be, this is how they should be, this is how he should be, this is how the world should be, this is how Derrik should be, this is how this class should be. We have identity system requirements, and when those requirements are not met, the identity system has two subsystems that we refer to as the fixer and the depressor. So the fixer's job is to try and fix things so that the identity system requirement can be met. The depressor is the system that kicks in when those efforts ultimately fail, which they do. So the depressor generates negative thoughts, the unpleasant body sensations. The fixer attempts to repair that state. So we have this sense of brokenness, damage. So when identity system requirements are not met, the depressor causes us to feel broken, that we need fixed. And the fixer is right there to say, oh, well, then let's do this. So all I need to do is work harder. I need to get up earlier. I need to sleep less. I need to do this. I need to do that. Or I need to manipulate my spouse. I apply this to domestic violence offenders in my work. They try to fix their spouse to meet their identity system requirements. And the identity system, when it becomes firmly in control, it can be, fixers can be aggressive, violent, other things that aren't good, aren't healthy. We have these storylines that the depressor generates. I'm not good enough, like I was saying. I'm broken. I'm damaged. This is wrong. The fixer kicks in, starts to try to make that change. So mind-body bridges really is about activities that we use, simple activities, to rest the identity system. So today you're going to experience mapping. We don't have time today to cover the whole MBB waterfront. That would take longer than we have, but you're going to experience mapping, and you're going to experience a few bridging awareness practices. If we have time, we can talk a little bit about thought labeling as well. So when we rest the identity system, it becomes less dominant. Our natural functioning automatically emerges, and we can take care of the imperative of the moment. Whatever we need to do in that moment, our natural functioning will take care of. Okay. MBB has transdiagnostic application, meaning I've used it in my practice successfully with myself to feel less anxious, less depressed, but also in working with clients that range from domestic violence aggressors to addiction to severe depression. I found it to be helpful across a number. There's published studies on its effectiveness with sleep. So when the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration used to have something on their website called the National Registry of Evidence-Based Practices, NREP. Maybe you've heard of NREP. MBB was listed on NREP, particularly for research that's been done around sleep and PTSD. So the VA in Salt Lake City is using MBB a lot to work with veterans who experience PTSD. So it can work across a number of different things. One of the things that I love, if not the thing I love most about MBB, is that it celebrates our strengths. It's not about fixing anything. It celebrates the fact that you and I already have these amazing capacities that we can tap into to get through our problems. So in this way, MBB is really recognizes that within us we have the capacity to be resilient, to face what we need to face, and to get through it. If we just get that identity system process out of the way. So there's two modes of awareness or of being at any time in our heads. So as you sit here right now, you're either checked in or you're checked out, meaning you are either participating fully in this moment, listening to what I'm saying, being aware of background noises and sounds, what your pen feels like in your hand, what your feet feel like on the floor. You're plugged in. Okay? Or we can be in our I system network, which is self-referential. So when we're in self-referential I system, we suddenly sort of are checked out of our surroundings and we sort of cave into ourselves. And we're thinking about all kinds of things. Usually when we're in that mode of awareness, our thoughts are not about the present, but they tend to be about the past or the future. Things that aren't real. The past and the future are actually not real. You breathe air now, not the past or the future. The past and the future are fictions. Certainly have some historical truth to the past, but you are creating now each time. Another thing I love about mind-body bridging, and we don't have time to go into this kind of level of detail, but when we are in that plugged-in mode, when we are in our comprehensive natural functioning, we can also experience a connection to all things around us. The universe is recreating itself moment by moment, and we're part of that. We're a living, animated piece of that miracle every second or nanosecond. It's that saying that when the butterfly flaps its wings somewhere, ultimately we're connected to that and we influence it. So when we're in that comprehensive awareness, I want you to understand that in mind-body bridging way of thinking, that's really big. That's universe size big. That we feel that connection to others. So it follows that when we are in this mode, we tend to be more compassionate. We tend to be more empathetic. We tend to be better connected to what other people are experiencing and how our actions might influence their actions. When we're in the self-referential network, what happens? It's just all about me. Me, 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 me. And it has this suffocating effect on us. We just sort of get lost. Have you ever driven somewhere and sort of lost 15 minutes of that trip? Like go to Salt Lake and you find you remember getting on the interstate down in Brigham, and then somewhere along the road you woke up around Ogden or somewhere, right? I mean, you were awake, right? But you were not fully awake because we cave inside of ourselves and we lose track of what it feels like to have our hands on the steering wheel, our foot on the gas pedal, experiencing other cars around us. I think we can all relate to that. So these two primary modes of awareness. Now, not to get too far into the neuroscience, but there is neuroscience. And these are our basic brain networks. Body-based processing network, and you can see the sub-networks, part of that. The psychosocial salience processing network, and the central executive functioning network. Now you can no more get rid of one of those networks and stay alive, really, than so you don't, they just exist. They're part of your brain. But some of them become more active than others, and when our I system is active, we end up moving to what we call the default network becomes much more dominant. And we'll explain a little bit more about this. So again, when we're not focused on a task at hand or the imperative of the moment, what is it that the moment is requiring of us? So you chose to be here, so that moment, the imperative of that moment is to be listening to the material that I'm sharing, right? And you may have other things that sort of need to go on right now, but that's the idea. So when we're not focused on the moment, our thoughts automatically converge to form an I-centered reality in the representational world. Or we like to say, you get the me tube turned on. Okay? I think there's something to Also how much we're into social media and that sort of thing. You would think that would be more of a being connected to others, but I'm afraid that it turns a lot into MeTube and causes us to get in this space. I don't have research to prove that, so that's just one guy's opinion, but it's just my experience clinically and personally. Shut those notifications off on your phone and see what happens to your life. It's pretty interesting. So mind-body bridging is really about getting out of that MeTube. So back to the neuroscience. When our eye system is active, this psychosocial salience processing network, that sometimes we refer to it simply by one of its subsystems, which is the default mode network, is dominant. So there are functional MRI studies that show how this is happening. So fMRI studies show that when a person is experiencing eye system-like symptoms, it's those networks in the brain that are lit up. Now that work is still very early, but there's enough evidence to say that we think we're onto something. So when the eye system is active, these other brain networks, which are lost their shading, become less dominant. They're still there, obviously, but they're not. It's the eye system network or default mode system network that becomes dominant. So what are the results of an overactive eye system? Well, here's just a short list. Anybody experience any of these? Yeah, we all do. Impairs performance, creativity, relationship issues, sleep issues, stress, anxiety issues, depression, burnout, psychosomatic issues, susceptibility to illness, overeating, addiction, sort of a loss of an appreciation for life. I mean, after all, if you're not feeling a connection to the life that's all around you, and you're caving inside of that MeTube, you lose some sense of what it's all about and the ability to appreciate what's going on around you for just what it is. Okay? The eye system mode of thinking is always really judging our environment. That's those requirements that are at work. So when we talk about being in the moment non-judgmentally, which a lot of the mindfulness practitioners teach, we're really talking about having rested our eye system. And some of you might notice that some of this, particularly the bridging awareness practices, have similarity to mindfulness stuff that you learned, and that's true. It wouldn't be inappropriate to place mind-body bridging somewhere in that mindfulness category, but it's more than that. I think you'll see as you learn, the mindfulness stuff does not include the eye system, which is at the root, we say, of things that are going on. So natural functioning as opposed to eye system functioning, as I alluded to before, is just really about this attitude of being in the moment, and just the more you practice it, the more you, I think, return to your childlike self, which is like this little one on the bottom, holding this toy. It's like, wow, this is blowing my mind. This is so cool. What is this? But as adults, you pick up something like that. Well, this is dumb. I don't have time for that. Nobody does this. Adults don't do that. I should be doing this. So that identity system presence and all of its requirements really, over time, get us away from this. But we think this is still in each of us. It hasn't gone away. You still love to play and figure things out. The puzzles in your life have become more complicated, and the challenges that you experience have become more complicated, but you can still figure them out. In fact, you have a part of your brain that likes to do that, if it's applied or if it's unleashed. So natural functioning, and forgive me for reading this, but it's important that we understand it accurately, is not an ideal state or behavior or goal. Okay? That would be a fixer. It is simply the person or groups, so groups have a collective I system. We don't have time to get into that today. It's the person's optimal response to circumstances at each moment. The executive functioning network is active. Natural functioning is the way things innately work in the universe. All instances of natural functioning are in harmony and balance with the entire universe. All human beings and social groups have the capacity to individually or collectively be in natural functioning. You've probably been in meetings that were dominated by I system activity versus those that were dominated by or that included a great degree of natural functioning. The ones that are natural functioning are creative, open, flexible. Ideas are all shared and important. Everybody feels like they're contributing. I system, again, is that me tube is turned on. And it's really tough to do things in groups when it's identity system functioning that's happening. Because then it's really all about all these individual I systems. So, in natural functioning, you see that these three primary brain networks are all online and not one is out of balance. So we still have our identity system. As I mentioned, it never goes away. We just learn to keep it from being the thing that's dominant. And we can't really make our executive functioning more dominant. We can simply, at least though, bring it up to balance with the other networks. So when the identity system is rested, we move towards this place of natural functioning, which is more harmonious mental and physical functioning. Awareness expands. We're more flexible. We're more adaptable. This tends to spill over into our relationships. It tends to spill over into our productivity. We have a version of mind-body bridging that we package in a form called productive mind that we take out to corporations and organizations and train them. If they want to increase their productivity, one surefire way to do that is to teach people about individual and collective I systems. And so we go out to businesses and train them on how to do that. The good news about all of this is you can rest the I system through your activities of daily living. When you wash your hands, do you actually feel the water? Do you feel them rubbing together, or do you just go through the motions? When you're walking, do you feel the force of gravity on your body? Do you feel your feet falling on the ground? Do you hear that? Do you experience that? It could be done anywhere. When you're brushing your teeth, when you're eating. Okay? It's all activities of daily living. Breathing. Let's talk about breathing for a second. Dr. Block didn't really like to teach breathing as a bridging awareness practice because he thought it's become a fixer. If all we need to do is just breathe, right? And then that solves everything. Well, I kind of disagree with him. I think breathing is an activity of daily living. Right? Okay. And if we simply tune into our breathing once in a while, not as a fixer, that we're broken and something needs to be fixed, that we need to learn to regulate our breathing and all that business, but you just become aware, I'm breathing. I think it's actually very powerful. When I teach the basics of mind-body bridging to children, breath is really important in my way of thinking. Because breath for a child connects back to something that was comforting to them even before they were born. They learn to listen to their mother's breathing, respiration, and her heartbeat. And that was something that they came to see as comforting. So breathing is a wonderful bridging awareness practice. Just don't turn it into a fixer. All right, so I've talked a little bit about this. This is a quick scan through some differences between executive functioning or natural functioning, network being where it needs to be, and identity system being the dominant one. I'll let you just scan through some of those so you get a sense of it. All right, so mind-body bridging is best learned through experience. So that's what we're going to do right now. So if those of you that were able to get the template that I have, you have one, I think you have a side called Part 1 or Part 2. Actually, it doesn't really matter which side you start with. But we're going to do what we call a troubling situation map. I don't have markers. I thought to bring some markers. And then I didn't. All right. Well, you can get the idea here. So those of you that have the template, you already have an oval in the middle. Those of you that don't have the template, just take a blank sheet of paper, draw a big circle with an oval in the middle of that circle. And in that oval, inside, I want you to write what now feels like one of the troubling situations that you're dealing with right now in your life. Okay, you're not going to share these with anybody. I may ask you to share pieces of it, but you don't have to share anything. You certainly don't have to share the situation. So write down, just in a few words, that troubling situation. All right, we got the words in there. Okay, now I want you to take about 60 seconds, and I want you to write around the oval, but inside the circle, all the thoughts and feelings that come to mind. Just write. Don't edit. Don't judge. Just write freely. There's no right or wrong. And spread those thoughts and feelings all around the circle, or wherever makes sense to you. Just get them down. Even if they don't make sense, just write it down, whatever comes to your mind. Okay, about 15 seconds. Okay, now at the bottom of the page somewhere, right where you notice in your body what you feel. Do you feel tension? Do you feel tightness? Do you feel something like that? Body tension, body discomfort. If you would just note at the bottom of the page where it is that you seem to be experiencing that. And if you don't notice any, that's okay. All right, now we're going to do a simple bridging awareness practice. So put your pens down. Make yourself comfortable in your seat. Now what I want you to do for about 30 seconds, maybe a little bit more, is I want you to simply tune in to background noises in the room. You'll start to hear things that you hadn't heard before, that you weren't aware of. You might want to tune into your breathing. That would be fine. Just anything that you can do to engage your senses. Okay? So I will now be quiet for about 30 seconds or maybe a little longer so that you can do that. If you want to close your eyes, that's okay. If your attention wanders off, that's normal. Just bring it back to your senses. Maybe try noticing what your feet feel like in your shoes. Or what do your pants or shirt feel like? Try to shut off that me tube and connect. Okay, now turn your paper over. Do the same thing. If you need to draw your own, draw the circle with the oval in the middle. Put the same troubling situation from the first side in the oval. So write the words again. As soon as you get the words inside the oval, now I want you to start writing whatever thoughts and feelings you're having around the oval, like you did before, but don't edit. Just whatever comes, write it around the oval. Some of it might be the same as before, some of it might be different. Just let it come. Just keep writing without editing. That's a very, very important skill in mapping, is the not editing, the not judging. About 10 more seconds. Okay. Let's share a little bit for those of you that are comfortable. What did you notice, if anything, was different about the first and second maps? You don't need to share your troubling situation, just was anything different? Yeah?
My second map is definitely more positive.
You would judge it as positive?
I would.
Okay.
There's not as many things.
Okay, so the fewer things that landed around the oval. Others? Yeah?
A more compassionate response, like towards the feelings like that involve particular people.
So a more compassionate response about feelings towards others that
Yeah.
were part of this?
Like maybe instead of it being all them, maybe some of the issue was maybe that I needed to be more kind of responsive to it. That,
Okay.
Like some of the responses were more that instead of just them, it was more like I should do something or more, I was more involved.
Okay.
in it.
Fair to say that maybe
But in a
the realm of possibilities were wider about what might
in a more compassionate way.
and more compassionate. Okay, good. Others? Yeah, right here in the blue.
Just more outward focus on my second map versus my first one.
More outward focus on the second map. Interesting. Yeah, right here.
Mine's more hopeful, and also I had noticed the positives that arose from the troubling situation.
Okay, interesting. So a little bit wider view of things, maybe. Okay. Others? Yeah, right back here.
My first one's more about me, and my second one's more about the people that affect me and the people I affect.
Okay. So again, the first one was a little more inside and the other one was more expansive. Good. There's a few hands. Yep.
Mine was more solution focused on the second one.
Second seemed a little more solution focused. Okay. Good. One or two more. Yeah.
I noticed more creativity in the solutions on the second side.
Okay.
Fear and stress on the first one.
So more fear, stress, first one, second one, some solution-oriented things were landing on the page. Okay, good. Let's do one more. Yeah.
I didn't find a ton of change.
Yeah, and some people don't necessarily on their first and second map, and that's okay. Yeah, it doesn't always translate that way. And there could be lots of different reasons why, which we won't get into today, but it's okay. The bottom line is it's okay if the map's the same. Okay. Maps are not right or wrong. They're just a device to help us kind of get into that space. We just do this as a real quick exercise to give people at least a little taste of the shift that can happen even with just a few seconds of bridging. So really what's happening is inside those networks, you're bringing the executive functioning network more fully online, and maybe it already was. Okay? We're not judging one way or the other, but your responses are pretty typical to those that we get over the years when we train with this real quick bridging awareness practice. Okay? So, again, no right or wrong. So sometimes I'll bring in a object lesson, but I thought this room was pretty large to do that. Although they do chemistry experiments here, so I could have maybe done that. But, really the difference between I system dominant functioning and natural functioning is like these analogies. So you might think about, instead of this saying the to-do list here, let's put the words in there, your troubling situation. So when we're on identity system functioning, our capacities are much more restricted. And so the things that we have to take care of in the moment feel much bigger. They kind of fill up that vessel because the vessel is smaller. But on the second map, we put the troubling situation over here on the right, and people often report, even with just a few minutes of bridging, that it feels like there's more solutions, more expansive. They just feel more capable to handle whatever it is they need to handle. So that's what's happening. So the question is, which which vessel do you want to live in? Another way that we teach it is with a sponge. So if I had a big bucket of water here and I wadded up a sponge in my hand and I plunged it into the bucket, how much water could that sponge absorb? Versus if I release the sponge and drop it in the bucket in its natural functioning form, obviously the sponge is going to then be capable of absorbing much more water. So that's really what we're after in mind-body bridging, is to spend more time in this natural functioning state and less time in this restricted place. And it's pretty straightforward, actually, how we do it. Okay, so we have, did we get out right at 12? Is that right? So we're just about out of time, but this is a good time to stop and see if there's any questions at this point. I'll say a few more things about fixer, depressor, but this would be a good time to ask questions. There's no dumb questions. I've fed you a lot fast, so if something is not clear or not making sense, all questions are good. Any questions? Comments? First question will get a prize up here. Yeah.
So, like, this is really informative and good, but then, back to being the fixer.
Yeah.
I'm ready to fix myself, so it's like, okay, so how do I do this? How do I do
I am so glad you're bringing that up.
mind and body? Good, I get a prize.
You do? Which one of those do you want?
I think the regular book.
The book? Okay. It's all yours.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that you said that, because that's always what I want. I try to end these little brief presentations is on this note. Mind-body bridging is not a fixer. You're not broken, and you don't need fixed. You just need to get something out of the way a little bit. So mind-body bridging is thought of as a takeaway, not an add-on to somebody's life. It's a removal. It's a takeaway. So you're simply taking away the dominance of the I system. So it's not a fixer. You're not broken. You don't need to go out of here today thinking, well, I need to come up with 12 strategies for how I'm going to use mind-body bridging. Wrong. Please don't do that. How about this instead? Throughout the rest of your day today, will you just take a few moments every now and then to plug into your senses? Listen for sounds in the room that you weren't aware of. When you're walking to your next part of the conference, pay attention to your feet. When you're sitting there, notice the force of gravity on your body. Tune into your breathing. Tonight, when you get home and you eat dinner, taste your food instead of just getting through it to check it off. Yes, I downloaded my calories for... right? But participate in it. Be plugged into it, to what it tastes like. So it's activities of daily living. Activities of daily living. ADL. It's stuff we do every day, but for lots of reasons, we become robots and go through the motions. We're so into checking off boxes and to-do lists and things like that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Those can be helpful if that's what your natural functioning suggests will help you. But don't leave here thinking there's anything more you need to do with your life. Actually, it's less. Just plug in to your senses. And if you do it enough, over time, you'll, I'm sure, notice a difference in yourself. Okay? When you're having those real difficult challenges and that identity system is really active. And how do you know the identity system is active? Well, usually your body's going to tell you first tight neck, sick stomach, all those kinds of things that you wrote on the bottom of your first map, that's your body's system telling you that your identity system is dominant. So you don't even need to figure out why. Just rest it and get back to what you need to do. Okay? Just a quick word about depressors, fixers, and requirements. So I'll have to do another workshop on this next year. But depressor, fixer, requirements, those are all really good things to know. They're helpful in the mind-body bridging practice. But if you do nothing else in mind-body bridging but bridging awareness practices and awareness of an active I system, you are well on your way to experiencing the benefits of mind-body bridging. Okay? Requirements, just real quick. Back to those identity system requirements, as I said before, the identity system forms a picture of how things ought to be. And there's lots of things that shape the formation of how things ought to be, the way we're raised, so on and so forth. Okay? There's nothing necessarily inherently wrong with those requirements, except for when they trigger the identity system. So identity system requirements are its fuel. So you can learn to rest your identity system, recognize it's active and rest it, but it's helpful over time to bring into your awareness the requirements that tend to trigger it so that you can diffuse them. So real quickly, how we diffuse requirements is we bring them into our awareness, and one of the ways that you can do that is pretty straightforward. If you turn to this first map, just take a quick look at the first map and note one of the things that you wrote, if you had to label it as probably the strongest, elicited the strongest emotion for you or strongest body tension, and you sort of highlight that one, for sure underneath that one is a requirement that needs to be brought into your awareness and diffused. Okay? So that's how we find requirements, is we do maps that bring them into your consciousness. And you don't really get rid of them, they're disarmed by bringing them into your awareness. And what we like to do is teach people to transform them from an identity system requirement to a personal preference. So an identity system requirement is, that's the way it has to be. Well, really? Is life like that? It has to be? Those identity system requirements at their core are logical fallacies. The way this should be, or the way that should be. Really? Now you might prefer it that way, so we teach people to see the requirement, restate it as a personal preference. Well, I would prefer that this is the way it was. So there's a big difference, because when you state it as a personal preference and your natural functioning approaches it, you have a better sense of what you really can do about it. But when your identity system is active and the fixer's in control, you're going to try to do anything, come hell or high water, to meet that requirement, even if it means running over somebody in the process. Not literally, hopefully, but you see what I mean. So that's the next step that we go to in teaching mind-body bridging, as we get deeper into recognizing fixer, depressor activity, and how to diffuse that. So in executive functioning, expectations are a part of life. But the difference is that when an identity system requirement is violated, we feel damaged, we feel broken, we feel like there's no hope, everything's screwed up. When a natural functioning expectation is violated, we feel disappointed, might feel let down, we could even feel sad, whatever the moment seems to require, but it's not going to have that intensity of a violated identity system requirement.